Ladies and gentlemen, please give standing to the Chair of Middlesbrough Council, Councillor Steve Blondell.
Please be seated. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting of Middlesbrough Council. First item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Yes, Chair. From Councillor Blythe, Councillor Brady, Councillor Goodchild, Councillor Lawton, Councillor Lewis, Councillor McIntyre, Councillor Sharrocks, and Councillor Janet Thompson. Sorry.
Okay, yep. Okay, Councillor McCabe, Councillor McTeague. Okay, can we agree those? Note those? Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any? Agenda item 3, the minutes of the ordinary council meeting on the 16th of January and the extraordinary council meeting on the 16th of January. Can we agree those? Thank you. Agenda item 4, announcements, communications. Just one for this meeting, and it's as a consequence of the events that took place in New Zealand this morning. Can I ask all to stand and observe a minute's silence to remember those who tragically lost their lives in the New Zealand mosque attacks earlier today? Thank you. Agenda item 5, petition regarding Tollsby shops. I'd like to invite the lead petitioner to hand her petition into Councillor Lewis Young. Councillor Dean. Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to, you have 2 minutes if you wish to say anything regarding the petition.
The Tollsby Shops petition. On behalf of the residents of Acklam, Councillor Biswas and myself would like to submit this petition to Middlesbrough Council. This derelict building has been stood empty for over 10 years, deteriorating by the day. The residents of Acklam should not have to live with this blight on their community. Prior to this, the site was a thriving row of shops, also providing much-needed homes. Joe Mass, the owners, have had planning permission for some time now to demolish the existing buildings and build flats and 2 shop units. We welcome the several proposals and planning applications to anchor these developments with a convenience store, which is a much-needed amenity in the Tollsby and wider area. We are confident that a convenience store would succeed in this location and would prove very beneficial for the community, in particular the elderly. We demand that in the alternative to early development, The owner either sell the site to a developer who will make progress or alternatively demolish the buildings and landscape the site, subject to agreed conditions with Middlesbrough Council. Councillor Biswas and I would like to thank our MP, Andy MacDonald, for working closely together with ward councillors and Middlesbrough Council and for all his hard work and progress so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Young, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank Councillor Dean for presenting the petition and for the work that she, alongside Councillor Biswas, the local community and Andy MacDonald MP, have done to ensure that the issue of Tollsby shops remains very much on the agenda. In the past, the council has worked with Joe Mast owned the site, who to have the area tidied up and made safe, but we do share the concerns of residents, and we do understand that there is a need for a longer-term commitment there and a longer-term plan. Which is why, after listening to the concerns of residents and after sitting down with residents and the councillors and the MP, we're delighted to announce that from next week, Middlesbrough Council and Joe Mast will be starting to discuss a deal for a joint venture on that site, which will see us take control of the site for development. And while I can't promise what will be on that development at the moment because it's very early stages, this is an extremely positive development, and we hope within 3 months we will have a joint venture plan in place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on to agenda item 6, questions from members of the public. We have 4 questions for this meeting. The first question is from Mr. Murdoch, and it's for Councillor Denise Rooney. Mr. Murdoch, are you in the room?
Thank you. This is a question for Denise Rooney, the Executive Member for the Environment and Commercial Services. In 2008, Middlesbrough Council chopped down over 800 trees on Site 44, which was Longridge Wood, Martin. Bearing in mind it is a Middlesbrough Council policy to replace the same number of trees that are removed, can Councillor Denise Rooney please advise me when, where and how many trees were replanted in the same ward? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. Councillor Rooney?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Murdoch, for your question. You're quite right, in 2008 we did have a policy of replacing trees one for one that had been removed or cut down. That policy is no longer in action. That was removed in 2014 with changes. However, I have been given the following information by the officers that an area of 11 acres, or equal to 4.5 hectares, along the Woodland Walk and the northern boundary to Newham Grange Farm was used to replant around 800 trees. I can't give you the exact number, but that was the figure that I've been given. It's in the estimate, in the circa of 800 trees were replaced. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The second... Is Councillor Walker in the chamber? No, right. I have been advised that Councillor Nicky Walker has had an issue and will be potentially late for the meeting. So I would ask Mr. A. Walker if we can defer Councillor Nicky Walker's question until she gets to this meeting. Is that okay? I will give you the opportunity to ask the question when Councillor Walker arrives. Or would you rather you just read the question out now when you get a written response from Councillor Walker? Okay, thank you. The third question is from Mr. J. Kabui, and it's for Councillor Mick Thompson. Mr. Kabui.
Chair, this question goes to the Executive Member for Culture and Communities. Chair, the Strong Communities Initiative remains one of the cornerstones of Middlesbrough Council in its work to bring communities in Middlesbrough together, irrespective of how you look or where you are coming from. In light of national and local events, particularly regarding Brexit and other tensions, could Councillor Thompson give some detail about what work the team has been doing particularly in Newport? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, thank you, Mr. Kabui. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Kabui, for the question. The Stronger Communities projects are funded from the Home Office, and to be fair to the Home Office, and we are sometimes, I think that was in recognition to some of the pressures that we've been facing around the changes that are ongoing in the community in Newport. And there is some fantastic work being done there around that. And you're absolutely right to say that is around creating awareness of different cultures and encouraging different cultures to understand each other and perhaps reduce tensions that might be there. And I think you've mentioned Brexit and other things. And of course, I'm sure that when you drafted the question, it was before the most appalling events that we've seen in Christchurch in New Zealand yesterday, which really just indicates how important this work is. And there are a whole range of people out there in Newport doing some great stuff. The PCSO there, Andy, who is a really well-valued member of the team there, the Streets Ahead team. I was in Newport School, Newport Hub. Again, our staff that work there, that coordinate the work of the Stronger Communities team, doing an absolutely fantastic job. I think it is always frustrating, and it does anger me at times that we do have people who see those tensions as an opportunity to exploit division and gain some political capital from that. The consequences of that don't bear thinking about, but I'm really grateful for the fact that our people out there and our Stronger Communities people work extremely hard, not just in Newport, but creating links between places like Newport and places like Thorntree. And I know that there's been some joint events that have been encouraged. And I know one particular event that I found very heartwarming was that we had a group of older women in Newport who had a bingo club, and it was very popular with that particular section of the community. And they invited some of the Asian ladies in to a bingo session, and it was really strange because the first session the two groups of people sat at either ends of the room and didn't really come together. I was there at Christmas where they were making Christmas cards, and it was great to see that group had started to really come together and really gel. So there's some really good stuff going on there, and it is really, really important work, and I'm very grateful to those who are engaged in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The next question is from Mrs. J. Slater, and it's for Councillor Brunton Dobson. Mrs. Slater, I invite you to ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. The Executive Member for Education and Skills, this is for. As the number of admissions to each primary school are recorded each year, one would expect that the total applications for secondary placement would be anticipated and provisions met. Why then, with these available figures, did the local authority fall so short that they notified 100 children and their parents that there were no places available for them at any Middlesbrough school? In accordance with this failure to provide, will the Council now undertake to ensure that proper infrastructure will be prioritised during the formulation of any local plans?
Thank you, Mrs. Slater. Councillor Brunton Dobson.
Thank you, Mrs. Slater, for your question. Firstly, I would like to apologise to the pupils and parents for the stress and anxiety they have suffered since the receipt of the letter that was sent out. Lessons have been learnt, and this will not happen again. However, whilst the Council does have a responsibility to place 2,000 children in Year 7 at secondary places, the Council does not control the number of places on offer at the 7 secondary academies. The academies themselves determine which children will be admitted to each school. At the moment, there is a shortfall of 134 places. Conversations are ongoing with head teachers in order to secure a place for all the children who wish to attend a school in the borough, and they will be placed before September. The Council does not receive funding to build a new school. However, a bid has been submitted by an academy chain for a new 900-place school. This will provide capacity to ensure that this situation will not happen again. Members, it may be worth noting that since 2015, and I wonder whose government was in there, the funding loss to schools in Middlesbrough is a huge £7.7 million. The average amount per child is 406. Schools are at breaking point.
Thank you, Councillor. Agenda item 7, Mayor's Statement and Report. Mayor Budd.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure we're all aware that this is the final scheduled full meeting of this council. So we've celebrated by finding the heating after 4 years. So I apologise for the temperature in this room. So I'd like to start, I hope on your behalf, by thanking some people. In particular, our staff. All doing hugely varying jobs, keeping the streets clean, cleaning our buildings, supporting our children and older people, and helping to change this place. A whole range of jobs, which I think we appreciate, and we should say thank you to them. So that's the first thing. I'd also, irrespective of political differences, like to thank councillors for everything that they've done in the last 4 years as well. Work at ward level is often not appreciated, not really seen, but makes a huge difference to the place that we live in. I'd also like to thank those councillors who get involved in outside bodies, licensing committee, planning committee, and in particular scrutiny. I think we've found over the last few years that scrutiny not only looks at existing decisions, but actually develops policy. And I think there's been some very successful policies developed by all of you, most of you, and that's been really helpful. I'd like to thank my executive for all their commitment and hard work. It's not always easy. So, a little bit more, in a way, thank yous later perhaps, but, and there's always going to be a but, I've got to say behaviour in this council chamber and outside has deteriorated a lot in the last few years. Political discussion and argument should end when we leave this chamber and not become personal, which it has on a number of occasions. I think in particular, personal attacks on officers have no place whatsoever in this council, and I hope that will stop. Those who hide behind social media do themselves and this council a disservice. As a consequence of the behaviour, the job of chairing the council has become much more difficult than it should be. Most people respect the chair, some do not. And so I'd like to thank Steve Blundell for the way he's conducted himself in some very difficult circumstances. So if I can leave those thanks for the moment and move on to some recent developments. Normally a big deal is made out of the Chancellor's spring statement. For some reason or the beginning with B, it hasn't hit the headlines this time. But it was a missed opportunity in a lot of senses. We know, the LGA know, and everybody in every council in the country knows that we are underfunded. There was no attempt, and not even a promise of funding to put that right. And it will be the autumn statement, which often is very close to Christmas, before we will have some definite news on that. That is very late for us to plan in future, so I think that is an opportunity missed. The Chancellor could have, as he's hinted, suggested at a post-austerity measure, which he didn't. Underfunding is not only in local authorities, but in schools, as has been referred to already, the police service, a benefit freeze on the NHS. So there are a lot of examples of things that he could, arguably should, have done. He did none of those, because Brexit just gets in the way of all good sense at the moment. So to move on to a couple of other things, I promised 4 years ago that we would have a new community bank. I went to the premises just north of Linthorpe, just north of Marks and Spencer's on Linthorpe Road, to our new community bank. It will open in the next couple of weeks, so it's almost ready. It's already operating online. This has taken a lot of effort and a lot of time, and some council officers have put a great deal of effort into that. It has been more difficult than it should have been, largely because of the way that the rent-to-buy operators have restricted what credit unions and community banks can actually do. But that will, I think, I know, will be a help, not a solution, but a help to a lot of people who need relatively cheap loans. That's an example of what we've done here. I'm very proud of what we've done here in the last few years in the face of austerity. And the contrast with a government which is paralysed and the way that we have operated here, I think, is quite remarkable. We set out a programme, we've delivered it, and we, a lot of us, came into politics to change things, not just to administer decline, which was an option. And negativity from a lot of people has not deterred us. So-called experts, like a particular businessman from North Yorkshire, has decried lots of things that we've done. He has made no effort to contact us. He has little information, and it's cheap shots.
Excuse me, can we have some quiet, please, from the public gallery? I've asked this many a times in the past. I will not allow people to be chuntering away when an elected member or the mayor is on their feet making a statement. So can I ask you, please, to be quiet in the public gallery? Thank you. Mayor Budd.
Thanks, Chair. We know what we're doing, and we know how to achieve our aims for all of the people of Middlesbrough. So finally, just one more thanks, and that's to our officers who secured the Radio 1 Big Weekend, which is another great coup for Middlesbrough. We are on a national stage in many senses, and this will bring a lot of people here and give us a lot of publicity, which we deserve. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions, comments? Councillor Rathmell.
Thank you, Chair. The Mayor's just referenced their protection of officers, and I applaud him for that. But what I would ask is, does that mean he's introduced any kind of policy in his last 4 years so that when he receives complaints from senior female officers, by his own admission, he won't sit on them in future? Because as a group, we've submitted a number of complaints because one of our group employees, a female officer, has received further intimidation from council officers. And is there any policies put in place to ensure that doesn't happen and that he will act in future?
Okay, Mayor Budd. That is difficult. I refuse to identify individuals, as we always have done, for the sake of those individuals, and I'm pleased that you haven't mentioned it either. I think we have policies in place which are effective, which work. If you've got anything that you haven't sent to me, please do so.
Thank you, Mayor. No further questions. We'll move on to agenda item 8, which is Deputy Mayor and Executive Member reports. We've got a very long agenda here today, 19 items on the agenda, and we have 26 questions that have been submitted by elected members. With your agreement, with the Council's agreement, I'm going to limit the questions to 1 minute to give everybody a fighting chance of asking their question. I'm going to limit the questions to 1 minute and 1 minute for executive members to respond. Where a councillor has submitted more than one question that they wish to ask of a member of the executive, I will give them 1 minute. If they can get both their questions in that 1 minute, fair enough. If they just want to dwell on one question or they want to prioritise one question above the other, that's okay. But basically, the principle is you will have 1 minute to ask your question or make your comment to a relevant executive member. Is everybody okay with that? Thank you very much. Okay, the first set of questions are for Councillor Charlie Rooney, and the first councillor to ask is Councillor Rathmell. I understand you've got more than one question, Councillor, but I'll give you a minute to prioritise as you see fit. Okay, Councillor Rathmell.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rooney, this question's on Centre Square and your repeated updates. despite promising repeatedly that the council is about to announce who will be moving into the office blocks. To date, the only announcements we've been sure of are that this Labour authority has ensured council officers will be moving into the high-spec buildings and that we'll be spending even more of taxpayers' money ensuring high-spec furniture for the buildings. It's disgusting that the way money continues to be wasted and pumped into these things. When will you stop being wasteful with public money, and when will you actually announce an occupant for the new offices? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rooney, would you like to respond?
To my previous answers on the occupants, we've got far more people asking to be in there than we've got space. And we, unlike some, respect commercial confidentiality. So as soon as that's made public, we'll all know about it. We're not wasting money. The new offices are actually costing less to run than the old office, as every report has said. And I do wish some people would preface everything they say with, in my opinion, or I believe, if that's what you do so believe, because you state it as fact, and it simply is not a fact.
Councillor Rooney said that every report has said so. So how does that reconcile with the GVA Bill Finger report that placed lots of caveats on this being a failure?
You do not need to respond if you don't wish to, Councillor. No. Right. Next question for Councillor Rooney is Councillor Story. And again, I believe you may have more than one question, but you have 1 minute, Councillor Story.
Yeah, just a couple of things that sort of do run into each other, really. I wanted to highlight the high street plans that we've got for Middlesbrough, and to highlight the regeneration of the Linthorpe Road area. I think it's really exciting to see what's going on there. I wanted to highlight the work that's been done by regeneration officers as well on that particular project and on the Centre Square development, with myself, Zafar and Linda as the 3 ward councillors. The 3 of us have been very closely involved, receiving briefings on a regular basis on all of those major projects, uplifting the Linthorpe Road area, as well as Centre Square and Boho Digital City project as well. And I think it's important to stress that how hard officers have worked on all of those things, and the added value that's going to bring to the town centre and to our ward. And as ward councillors, we always thought it was very important for us to be involved in those discussions and to make sure that we regularly sit down with officers and go through those plans and raise concerns as well, because there have been concerns raised by residents, and we've brought those issues to the officers and they have been dealt with. And when problems have arisen, and the 3 of us have made sure that the people in the town centre's voice has been heard, because it's important that we all take ownership.
It's important
we all take ownership of the things that happen in the town centre. I'd just like to say thanks very much for what's going on.
Councillor Rooney?
Yeah, I would completely agree with that, and it's great to work with councillors who work with the people, because change does upset some people. Other people try and make political capital out of that. Our councillors throughout the town, and especially in that area, have worked with the people and shown the positives, because there's a massive positives in that. And at that, I'll leave it. They're all in the report. We've done very well with moving forward, and with moving people forward with us through our councillors' efforts. And I would echo what you said about the officers as well, because we said at the recent exec meetings, the Mayor said it and I said it, these things don't just land on us. They come through tremendous work from our officers, and all councillors are welcome at executive meetings, even the opposition.
Thank you, Councillor. Final question for Councillor Rooney is from Councillor Jacob Young. Councillor Young.
Councillor, have you actually secured a tenant for Centre Square yet? Because it's starting to look like the council has just paid for new officers for themselves. Thank you.
I refer you to my previous answer.
Right, moving on. Next question is for Councillor Michael Carr. It's from Councillor Rathmell. Councillor Rathmell.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Carr, at a recent scrutiny panel, they heard from the current chair of the Middlesbrough Safeguarding Children's Board that MBC was required by statute to disband the board and replace it with a mechanism that was more effective. The statutory deadline for this is looming. Can you explain why there's been no update to all councillors on this matter? And can you also state when you will ensure effective arrangements are available so that they can be scrutinised prior to them being implemented? Because I do appreciate that was a concern of the existing chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rathmell is correct that we are now, or will shortly no longer be, obliged to have a local Safeguarding Children board. The government has made it optional for authorities to provide alternative arrangements. The arrangements we are working towards is to have a joint South Tees Safeguarding Children board, and that will be implemented in the course of the next 6 months.
Thank you, Councillor. Next set of questions are for Councillor Mick Thompson. First questions are from Councillor Halawi, who again has got more than one question, so you can either ask one question, Councillor, or roll them in, but you have 1 minute. Councillor Halawi.
With reference to Section 9 of Councillor Thompson's report, which covers some of the extensive, effective and successful work which is going on in Newport Ward dealing with antisocial behaviour, I really want to commend the joint services, including the police and enforcement agencies, for dealing with this behaviour. What I would particularly like to commend is that the outcomes are dealt with and engaging the perpetrators of antisocial behaviour to provide education and guidance to them, and people are being dealt with on a face-to-face basis. The other thing I wanted to mention is the celebrations in the town and in Newport Hub for the International Women's Day. There were amazing things going on in the town, and it was an honour and a pleasure to be invited, together with Councillor Walters, to address the women from all over the town, from all over our diverse communities, to share in this day and to celebrate women's achievement past and present. It's also a call to action. The theme for the day this year was Better the Balance, Better the World. I was going to ask everyone to stand like this because this was the way we had to have the posture, but I won't since I'm under pressure for time. But what a wonderful world it would be if we did have a world where there was balance, fairness, equality, justice and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Lowy. That section 9 of the report refers to some of the issues we've had to deal with regarding antisocial behaviour, but as she knows, and certainly I know, that's a small part of the great things that are going on in Newport, and that will be supplemented by the landlord licensing programme that we have. And I was really grateful to the local people who met at the Streets Ahead office with myself, yourself, and a representative from the Evening Gazette, and we regaled the journalists there with the great stories that were going on. But I think the most touching stories came from a woman who I'm hesitating to name, but a woman called Mavis who lives in Longford Street, who's lived there for 60 years. And she was so positive about her area, was so positive about some of the friends that she'd made that come from other communities, some of the Romanian men that were helping her to tidy up the alleyway that she had there. She actually took us walking down there, and we saw the planting and the trellis work and whatever. And, you know, it's people like that who are the glue that hold places like Newport together. And I'm really grateful for the work that she does there and other councillors do there and residents do. It could go on forever. I attended an event in the Newport Hub earlier this week, and we had a song from the children of Newport School, and just looking across those children as they were singing, it was quite clear that they came from almost the four corners of the earth. But the song they sang was about home and the importance of home. And when they said home, they meant Newport, and they were very proud to say that. So that was, it's very easy to focus on some of the challenges we've got there. We shouldn't shy away from them. They are being dealt with, but we should never forget what is strong in Newport, not only what is wrong. The Women's Day celebrations, I'm really disappointed I wasn't there. I was asked to speak, but I felt that that was inappropriate. But I'm really glad that went really well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question from Councillor Arundale, Stronger Communities. Councillor Arundale.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, before I ask the question, I'd like to say how good it is to see that wonderful poster celebrating the Sikhs Naga Kirtan, which is held every year in the town centre. Actually, it's a shame that nobody from the top office there bothers to turn up, but there you go. My question is around the North Eastern Migration Partnership, which I believe, Councillor Thompson, you chair. Surely you know the situation in the town regarding the schools and the problems we've got with the schools, regards numbers. Why further then have you assigned through that board more migration to Middlesbrough rather than send it to areas that have spare capacity. That would surely have been a more sensible thing to do, instead of having a situation where parents in this town are sent letters, partly due to what's happened to that, saying their children haven't got a place in the town, in the school. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I invite you to reply, Councillor Thompson. If I could remind you if you could possibly keep it
I'll be as brief as I
Thank
possibly
you.
can, Chair. And it's right to point out that I am the Chair of the North East Migration Partnership. I'm grateful for the fact that the Councillor mentioned that that pressures from international arrivals were only part of that. And I hope you've read the briefing, because it puts that into that context. I have to disappoint him, perhaps, in saying that the work of dispersal into areas of the United Kingdom for people who are seeking asylum, as is their right under international law, and to be fair in context, this country takes far fewer than most other countries, so we need to understand that. But the work of dispersing people out to communities so that they have accommodation, and I don't shy away from that. I think these people are entitled to decent accommodation. They are entitled under international law. But the process of dispersing them lies with the Home Office. And I have to disappoint you again to tell you that the Home Office have actually circumvented this organisation, this authority, in that dispersal process, to the point where we're not told who's coming, we're not told what their needs are, and we're not told how many are coming. Now, I welcome the refugees and people seeking asylum that come here. I welcome them. I want to make sure that they get good quality accommodation and they have all of the support that they require. But you need to understand that this process is run by the Home Office. And I want to tell you another problem that we've got. It's privatised. It used to be run by local authorities, but it was privatised. So it was run by a company called G4S, who I'm told lost a lot of money on the whole process. They subcontracted that in Middlesbrough and in Stockton to a company called Jomast. Now, I'm pleased to say that that contract has been redrawn. It's now going to be run by a company called Mia's. We've met well, you asked the question. I'm going to give you the answer. Well, okay then, but I just think it's really important that you're informed on these things. We've got Mia's now a contractor, very keen to work with us. Home Office also, very keen to work with us through the work of the North East Migration Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question for Councillor Hubbard. Again, North East Migration Partnership. Councillor Hubbard?
I'd withdraw my question, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Next questions are from Councillor Walters, who has more than one question. And like I say, Councillor, if you can ask him within the minute. Councillor Walters.
Thank you. First of all, just like to say, my opinion, sustainable provision of arts initiatives is good for everyone. Socially, culturally, economically and intellectually. So I am delighted to see that Middlesbrough Council has won 2 Hearts for the Arts Awards as Best Local Authority Arts Initiative for Community Cohesion with Eramus and Best Local Authority Arts Champion for Mayor Dave Budd. And I'd like to alert everyone to the fact that this work continues through the town. We are, with Tees Valley Arts, MEMA, Middlesbrough Football Foundation and Teesside University, working always to secure funds to achieve transformative and creative civic change. And of course, it's marvellous to hear that we've won the big weekend. That's coming. So congratulations to everyone. But I just wanted to remind everyone that this town is full of music, always is. We have music in the town hall, series of chamber music concerts. We have big performances from orchestras and the opportunity given to young musicians in the crypt every month, a classical cafe, in addition to all of the other stuff. So this is a musical town. It's good for us, really good for everybody, for our well-being. Please, please try to make it part of your life.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson?
Quick in my response, Chair, because I realise time is pressing, but I echo the sentiments that were made by Councillor Walters, and just to echo the point that winning those 2 prestigious awards, one for our Mayor, who has made sure that culture is at the heart not only of what we do here in Middlesbrough, but in the Tees Valley as we build towards the Tees Valley City of Culture. And to see Eramus winning that award, and I witnessed that, I know you didn't know, lots of other people did, it was a fantastic event that engaged the community in Middlesbrough and is ongoing now through things like the Streetwise Opera and the Southpaw Company. So thank you for the comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question, again for Councillor Thompson, is Councillor Udin. Councillor Udin.
Sorry, Chair, did you say for Councillor Thompson?
That's what I've got down here, Councillor Udin, yeah.
No, I'm afraid no, it wasn't for Mr. Thompson, it was the other councillor.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next question then is for Councillor Jacob Young.
Thank you, Chair. Given all the other things happening in Stewart's Park at the moment, can the councillor confirm whether or not the Cleveland Show will be happening this year and how much Middlesbrough Council is going to contribute? Thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
I will need to get back to you on that question. I don't have that answer at hand.
Okay, the next question for Councillor Thompson is from Councillor Mohan. Councillor Mohan?
Chair. Can I ask Councillor Thompson if a tender exercise was undertaken regarding the work for the new brand in accordance with Middlesbrough Council's own policy?
Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether the councillor was at the briefing that we had around the branding, where there was an explanation. We also had the call-in, where the explanation as to how that process happened. So the answers were there. Quite happy to reinforce those by sending you that information again.
Say as well, Councillor Thompson.
No, excuse me, no, you've asked your question. We've got 20...
in-house. That's why I'm asking about the tendering.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Councillor Lewis Young, and it's for Councillor Halawi. I think you've got a couple of questions, so can you roll them into one? And I say you have 1 minute.
In developing the M Homes, which is a project to develop 100 units, homes, over 2 years on 3 council-owned sites, Gresham, Beechwood and Hamilton North. These are really interesting developments that we have this new way of working. And the second thing I wanted to say was to commend the success of the Gresham Neighbourhood Forum and the Gresham Neighbourhood Plan. This enables local residents to include their voice in the vision and general planning policies for the use of land in their designated local area. This is really a new development, a stage where we can really have local people's voice heard in what happens to the land, the area and the houses around them. Thank you.
Councillor Young?
Thank you, Chair. I think I've said it before, but I'm really excited about M Homes. It's really a really bold and radical policy. Dare I say it's a Labour policy. It's only something a Labour council would deliver. I think it's really exciting. We've lodged 2 of our areas, the Gresham and the Beechwood, with different tenures of housing, and we're really exciting about how we can develop those houses as well. So there's modern methods of construction we can look at. I think it's really exciting. As for the Gresham one, I think the commendations really go to the residents and the local businesses who came together for that plan. This is a really resident-led policy, and the council really supported it and allowed it to happen. We will now be working with them to develop that plan, and it is about working with them and the council to ensure that the Gresham area fits into the wider regeneration of the town centre.
Thank you. Next set of questions are for Councillor Brunton Dobson. First one is from Councillor Coop. Councillor Coop.
Thank you, Chair. Last September at OSB, I mentioned about the schools. I mentioned about the development in the south of the town, maybe mostly in my ward, where you have a lot more houses. I understand what's happening, I understand what's been said tonight, but when you have a resident that came on to me, most distressed that their child didn't have a place, and I've still had them on today. I know the council are working very hard. I understand the officers in this council, which after the 4 years I've been here, I have to congratulate all the hard work done by the officers here. They are working very hard, but I want to be assured that as all the development happens, and a lot of it is in my ward as well, we've got 500 houses here and another 1,400 houses there, that this situation will not happen in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Brunton Dobson.
Can I refer you to my comments earlier? The government provides schools. We do not have the money for that. The government took that responsibility away from us. So if you could speak to our government. Thank you.
Next question for Councillor Brunton Dobson is from Councillor Chris Hobson. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brunton, in our ward, we've got a child with special educational needs who was told that they didn't have a place. Can you confirm that even a child with special educational needs really does need to be with the peers and that there will be a place for them, because it seems to me that we can do people, can do place, cannot do schools.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brunton Dobson.
I refer you to my previous comments. However, we are looking at all those children who do not presently have a place. They will all have a place by September. There are ongoing conversations with head teachers and other opportunities, which I can't reveal at the moment, but every child will have a place by September.
Final question for Councillor Brunton Dobson is from Councillor Halawi. Councillor Halawi.
Obviously, you went all, yeah. So, is it on? Right, okay.
Well, yeah, no, you're quite correct. I'm sorry. I have a list of questions that have been submitted. I must go with the list of questions. I accept that, Councillor. This is the list that was submitted. There's a deadline for submitting questions, and if there's been a change, it can't have been done by the deadline. I'm sorry about that. Councillor Alawi, would you like to ask the question? Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor, for that, for the comments. Yeah, it was a good event, and I hope it continues from year to year, getting all our designated teachers together to increase the outcomes for our children. They do need support, particularly our children looked after, and we're working as hard as we can, to improve their outcomes. So thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Right, next set of questions are for Councillor Denise Rooney. First one, Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say how pleased I was to see the report on the progress that's being made in Middlesbrough on period poverty. We have heard this week that the government will provide free sanitary products in secondary schools, in colleges in England from the next school year. And this has been described as a huge step by all those people who have been campaigning on this issue for a long time. The move comes after campaigners called for action from the government amid claims that girls from low-income families can end up missing school during their periods because they are unable to afford sanitary protection. A poll of 1,000 girls and women aged between 14 and 21 carried out in 2017 found that 1 in 10 had been unable to afford sanitary wear. A further 12% were forced to improvise because of the expense of the products, and 49% of girls have missed an entire day of school because of their period. This announcement is part of a cross-government push on eliminating period poverty, and it comes after the NHS pledge to make tampons and sanitary towels available to patients. In August 2018, ahead of us, the Scottish Government became the first in the world to make sanitary products available free to all pupils and students in schools. And Dawn Butler, Shadow Minister for Women and Equalities, said this is a victory for all those who've campaigned for an end to period poverty. Labour Party set out its support for this in conference in 2017. I'm really pleased to see that we're ahead of this in Middlesbrough. We've been working with organisations, including the Red Box, and I'm aware of some of our schools who have been working with that as well. And we've recognised that issue.
Could I ask you to wind up, Councillor?
Yeah.
You would only have a minute.
Okay, just to say thank you for the work that we're doing. Okay.
Councillor Rooney.
Am I on? Yeah. Yes, I'll just keep it very brief because I think the councillor has covered nearly every point. But just to say, yes, we're pleased to work with the Red Box campaign. We're sad that it's something that's necessary in today's age, and that the aim of taking this forward is to make available in all of our public buildings sanitary products, because we know that this doesn't just affect young women and girls. We'd like to see it extended to the primary schools, and there's a significant number of women who work in low-paid jobs, and we'd like to see all of them being able to access products.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question for Councillor Rooney is Councillor Jeanette Walker. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair.
I just basically want to just quickly mention the fact on page 3 of Councillor's report regarding the capital works and improvements to the St Hilda's Chapel in the crematorium. Let's face it, we all know somebody who's going to go there to that crematorium, friends, family, and inevitably maybe even ourselves. And I think that all the improvements that have been made have been sensitively done, absolutely to a fantastic gold standard as far as I'm concerned, and many people have commented to me. And I think it's wonderful that we've got such a fantastic resource at our fingertips, basically, for such a final journey for many people. And I think it's done beautifully. And congratulations to everybody concerned with the planning, the works, down to the people who dig the graves, etc. And I think it's amazing. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rooney.
Thank you, Councillor, for those. I will take that back. I've been down, obviously, to visit the St Hilda's Chapel, and it does look totally different. It's light, it's welcoming. So, yeah, great work done by the teams down there to make it. We're not finished yet. There's still more to do, and we're looking at how the landscaping looks over the next 12 months. And I have had a comment from one other councillor about something that didn't go quite according to plan this week, so I will be taking that back as well. Thank you.
Okay, next question is for Councillor Nikki Walker, and it's from Councillor Story. Councillor Story.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to generally comment on Councillor Walker's report, because I think there's a lot of really good stuff going on in the Finance Department. One of the things that we looked at Corporate Affairs, which is actually in the report, is about the value for money stuff, and I think it's really important to stress that 20% of local authorities that are very similar to our own, their conclusions from the auditors are qualified, but we have an unqualified certificate, which is clearly a very considerable achievement. I think that's really good. There's also lots of excellent work going on in terms of financial inclusion and particularly universal credit, which is a massive issue in our area, and it's really great to see the council putting in the efforts that they are to support people through those issues that they may be facing in terms of that particular change in benefits. So I just wanted to praise the work that's going on, say congratulations to officers and all that they're doing, and just ask Councillor Walker to comment.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies for my late arrival. There was a good reason for it. Thanks to Councillor Story for his comments, which will pass them on. I would stress it's not just finance, it's governance and support as well, because there's a lot of work going on in the governance teams as well. But yeah, I tried to give an overview of what's happened over the last 4 years. Seeing as I understand we're coming into election time, there has been a lot of work done by officers, and I think sometimes it goes unrecognised, so I'm very grateful for his comments, which I'm sure that James and myself will take away.
Thank you, Councillor. The final question relates to sections 2, 3 and 4 at the rear of the executive members' reports. This question's for Councillor Mick Thompson, and it's from Councillor Higgins. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I was at the launch of the Empower event on Monday, and it was an absolutely fabulous morning. There was lots of different organisations there, all wanting to promote and get the people involved in all different activities. Councillor Thompson spoke, and there was 3 ladies, one from the football club and 13, and I forgot the other organiser. Aging Better, that's right. And honestly, it was a brilliant event, and there was lots of people there from right across the community, and I hope it continues. I know Councillor Thompson has been right across the town presenting the same thing that they did on Monday morning, and I think this is the way Middlesbrough should go. Get the people involved and work together. Thank you.
Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I'm grateful to the Council for the question and grateful for the sentiment within that. I realise I've only got a minute. To be honest with you, I could probably take as long as it's taken to deliver, to present the Empower Middlesbrough strategy. But there's been lots of highlights as we've been around Middlesbrough to Thorntree, to Newport, to the hubs around the place. But I think I'll finish on where we finished, which was last night at UCA, Unity City Academy. The school there did us really proud. There was presentations from Romanian kids. We tasted some Romanian food. There was music from the Czech Roma kids. But I'll finish on this point because we had some poetry readings from young students from UCA. And each and every one of the poems was about Middlesbrough and how positive they were about Middlesbrough's young people. And every one of them managed to weave into the poem the statement that we are a can-do people and this is a can-do place. So I'm thank you for the question.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, we will now revert back to agenda item 6, as Councillor Walker is now in the chamber, and I will invite Mr. A. Walker to ask his question of Councillor Walker. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Nicky Walker, Executive Member for Finance and Governance. My question relates to the culture of openness and transparency at Middlesbrough Council, including, but not limited to, freedom of information and environmental information requests. I have been advised by Middlesbrough Council that the service area responsible for transport planning, highways and road infrastructure in 2018 responded to 65, I'll say it again, 65 freedom of information and environmental information requests outside of the 20-day period. I have also been advised that Middlesbrough Council is responsible collectively for ensuring that it complies with the letter and the spirit of the Freedom of Information Act 2000. It is my own experience that some, but not all requests have been delayed beyond the maximum of 20 days. And these have been escalated to internal review and in some instances referred to the ICO, where they are under investigation or being monitored. Please can Councillor Walker explain why Middlesbrough Council believes that it is being open and transparent with regard to its handling of information and environmental requests, yet from my perspective, backed up by recent data provided by the Council, this does not appear to be the case.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Councillor Nicky Walker, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Walker, for your question. And regarding the culture of openness and transparency, it is important, and I'm sorry if you haven't always received a reply within the 20-day period. I do believe that providing the public with a source by which they can access accurate information is really important. However, the simple reason is the huge increase in the number of requests with depleted resources provided by the government for officers to deal with such requests. So to give you a little comparison, in 2015, the Transport Planning, Highways and Road Infrastructure received 67 such requests. So if you'd had 65 of those would be outside the 20-day period, obviously it would be an extremely high percentage. In 2018, it was 525. We haven't got more officers to deal with it, so the officers are having to deal with that request. Over the last 2 years, for example, there have been 237 officer hours spent on freedom of information requests for the Dixon's Bank scheme alone. This is despite the fact that we try to be proactive by publishing information on the websites where members of the public can access it. In the Dixon's Bank, for example, officers also attended Martin West, Martin East and Nunthorpe Community Councils, and I believe the Mayor and the Executive Member concerned also attended Nunthorpe Parish Council. Just to give you another comparison, Middlesbrough Council as a whole responds to 89% of the freedom of information requests within the time, compared to the council, the government department, responsible local government, where their rate of response within the time is 74%. So comparatively, we do slightly better than the government do on this. But again, I'm sorry for any undue delay that you feel like you've experienced.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on, agenda item 9, report of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. I will now invite the Vice Chair of the OSB, Councillor Story, to introduce the report. Councillor Story.
I'd like to move the report as written, but I also wanted to just very briefly say, I've only been Vice Chair of this committee for a year, but I wanted to say that over the last 4 years, in the short time I've been on the council, the scrutiny panels have done a tremendous amount of really important work on behalf of the people of the town. Some of the reports that have been produced have changed national policy, and particularly in health, but all of the council scrutiny panels do a tremendous amount of work in making sure that the council and the executive hear different ideas, different ways of working, and make improvements and changes to the way we do things. And I think anyone who engages with scrutiny in a positive way, whether you're on the Labour side or anywhere else, will find scrutiny a very worthwhile and profitable venture, because it's really important that we make sure we do things in the best way possible. We look at a lot of best practice. We've heard a lot of national and regional best practice options, and taken many of those on board in terms of the way we do policy in Middlesbrough. And I think the other thing I'd like to highlight as well is if anyone, perhaps the members of the public as well, if you've not ever taken the time to read a scrutiny report, I would recommend that you do that, because the officers who work in scrutiny, and I'm a chair of a scrutiny panel, and I work very closely with the officer who works with me, and the officers spend a huge amount of time researching and putting together these reports, and they are excellent. There's a lot of very detailed information in there which is worth reading, help people to understand policy and how the council works in a better way. And I think I could recommend scrutiny to anybody who was interested in looking at how the council works. I'd just like to praise the officers, praise all the members who get involved with scrutiny. Anyone who doesn't engage with scrutiny as much as they might, please do get involved. Please do come to panels, because it is important and it does make a big difference. The only other thing I wanted to say is, I know Councillor McGee wanted to reference some of the work that has been going on her panel, so I'll just open it up to Councillor McGee and leave it there, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any questions, comments? Councillor McGee?
Very briefly, as we're so pressed for time, just to tell you a little bit of information about the most recent report of the Adult Social Care and Services Scrutiny Panel. Our latest investigation was to produce a report on lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender, looking at community and elderly care. So we were particularly interested here in looking at issues, concepts and impact surrounding LGBT and T community, particularly in that context of elderly care and also within care home environments. We looked at the work of the council, its partners, voluntary sector organisations, and all of those who are providing care for the LGBT and T community. And we wanted to have a look at effective strategies, interventions, and to identify future work projects to improve care and provision with older LGBT and T people. Now, we heard from many organisations, and some of those accounts that we heard were extremely moving. The work was timely. There's been a lot of work happening nationally around these issues. And I think really in conclusion, we moved our thinking forward. We were able to offer leadership by a council to look at these issues. And really key emerging from that was that we need to increase our understanding and our awareness of these issues. We need to offer training to those staff who work in elderly care homes or who work with the elderly community. And in addition to that, we need to look at ourselves as a council to offer support, to offer training, to offer awareness, not only to elected members, but also to those people who work for the council. And this will have some implications for our commissioning processes there as well. So thank you for your time, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Arundel.
Thank you, Chair. Further to Councillor Story's words there, I think he's dead right. We can change things through scrutiny, and I'm pleased to say that I did take a subject to scrutiny, which proved I was justified in taking it to the scrutiny because they asked for an extra £1.5 million for the LED lighting scheme. Wasn't justified. And the officers took it on board and we got that back. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Okay, no further questions. Can we note the report? Thank you. Agenda item 10, pay policy statement. Councillor Nikki Walker.
Just move the report, Chair. Give me time.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Can we note the... Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. Once again, I note at paragraph 6 that we've failed to include the poorest paid within the authority, such as the adult apprentices and the apprentices we have. When are we going to undertake a correct and proper analysis based on the lowest paid and include the lowest paid staff? It might result in fewer FOIs as well.
Councillor Walker?
Chair, this is a report that we that we are told how to produce it. It's not our policy that we exclude the apprenticeships. That is the way we are told to produce a report. So it's not. That's beyond my my power, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Can we agree the report? Thank you. Agenda item 11, mortgage interest rate. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite fitting that I think my last report of the as executive member of this within these 4 years is on the most riveting subjects. But given the time constraints, Chair, I'll just move the report and take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions, comments? Can we agree the report? Thank you. Agenda item 12, Vision for Middlesbrough 2025 update. The Mayor. Mayor Budd.
Thank you, Chair. We've already referred to a number of items in here, but this is a fairly straightforward but I think illustrative update of the progress we've made in the last 4 years towards a fairer, safer and stronger Middlesbrough. The report background is fairly obvious. The progress achieved relatively recently includes quite a number of amounts to significant progress. You will recall in March 2017 we launched an investment prospectus with some ambitious schemes to deliver £600 million of inward investment and 5,000 new jobs. We have reported from time to time, and will continue to do, I hope, progress towards that. To date, we've received £194 million of inward investment and over 1,000 new jobs. That is quite an achievement, given the background of austerity and difficulties in the Tees Valley economy. As I've said before, we do know what we're doing. And these things don't just happen. They happen over quite a long period of time. It is quite difficult to do something in the short term, but we have plans in place to make sure that these items occur. Our house building programme has been very successful. There is a demand, simply a demand for people wanting to live in Middlesbrough, and I think we should be pleased about that. In the last 4 years, we've established a combined authority. I think that will grow. I think it will have a greater ambition in the future. I think there's all sorts of ways in which I would like to see it develop, but it's a fairly young organisation. It has done things. It has created an investment plan for the area. It has a number of plans and strategies which will benefit the whole of the Tees Valley and Middlesbrough in particular. We published a cultural strategy in 2018, which is about citizen-centred approach. This is not about high culture. I'm often asked why I'm so interested in culture. It's around, as Councillor Walters has mentioned, it's around celebrating what we do, what we are, who we are, our heritage. And you can do that in a number of ways. And just enjoying yourself as well. It doesn't sound much, but that's why people stay here. And I think as we move towards a bid for the Tees Valley City of Culture, I think there are a number of things that we've already done now which will add towards that. There's quite a lot of other things to do which are in the pipeline, and I think that's a really exciting message. It gives us positive media. That's not the reason for doing it. The reason for doing it are the people who live here, but I think the profile helps attract development. We know that. We know that the people who will come to the Grade A offices just outside of this building are not just attracted by pounds per square foot. That's a very old-fashioned notion. They're attracted by what the place is like, what I can do, where I can go, where the schools are, where the culture is, where the restaurants are, where the retail centre is, and where the transport infrastructure is as well. They are as important as pounds per square foot, and I think we know that. We've had that validated not just through council officers, but through many experts which we have used to create the plans. They are not on the back of an envelope. The background of austerity is referred to in here as it always will be. But I think the mention recently about our social investment plans are really to get the benefits of the physical infrastructure which is happening to more people in Middlesbrough. That is the point of it. So I think we moved a long way, and we've got a long way further to go. An investment prospectus Mark II will be available later in this year. I think some of us have already seen some plans for Boho, the next generation, and the number of jobs that will be created there, and the number of graduates and young people who will stay here because of it, because that's a very important part of it. So I hope you can note the progress achieved so far, and then the next paper moves on to where we go from here. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions, comments from that? Yeah, okay. Councillor Biswas and Councillor Branson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm glad that Mayor actually said we have a fantastic policy on equality and diversity. As we all know, that this town is shaped such a way because of the other people came and lived in Middlesbrough. And one of the good examples what I'm proud to represent is Middlesbrough Mela. 29th year coming up, we're working towards the 30th year where we will be helping or working with Middlesbrough Council for the building of our city culture. So that shows the integration and everything else. Also, what another factor is, I think sometimes we are seeing there's an organization in Middlesbrough really working hard for many years, but they're struggling. These are all volunteers. All these organizations work through volunteers, and they do it because of the passion of it, and the love of it, and the love of the town. Otherwise, you know, these sort of things, just like the Mayor said, it doesn't happen just by default. That organization is Taste of Africa. What a fantastic work they do. And African contribution to this town back, I think sometime back in 1930, you know, building the railways and things like that. And not only that, above all, I think, you know, the historians would know, we are all, the humankind are all indebted to Africa. If Africa wasn't there, we all human beings wouldn't have been here. We are all the descent because of Africa. So these sort of things, through culture and through expression, I think Middlesbrough is great that is taking forward. So I'm echoing the Mayor's report on there for equality and diversity, and may that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor David Branson.
I want to refer to section 11, which was about the house building programme, and I'd like to congratulate the council on the fact that almost 2,000 new homes have been built in the past 4 years. This is a tremendous achievement. We're all aware of the fact that housing has been a major problem in this country, the lack of affordable housing. Recently, the Social Housing Commission reported that we needed 2,000 social housing units per year. Last year, we managed to build 6,000. Middlesbrough is against a trend here. It's making sure that we do actually have housing available for people, and for that reason I very much commend what we have done. Because if we don't build housing, the result is that people end up without anywhere to live, or having to live in short-term provision in bed and breakfast, or in areas of the private rented sector which provide poor accommodation and are unregulated. So providing houses is providing people with what they need to create a home and to create a better environment. And I raise that point because there are some people who argue we shouldn't build any more houses in Middlesbrough, particularly in the south of Middlesbrough. We should build nothing. Well, that would actually mean that people don't have those houses to live in that most clearly are demanded. That kind of policy of stopping any further development is both selfish and foolish. We need housing for our people. I'm very grateful that the council has actually put this programme in place. I commend them for it, and I would point out as well, it's benefited us financially. The £5.5 million that it has provided for us enables us to avoid cutting the services that otherwise we may have had to cut. So once again, can I say, well done, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tom Marston.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jacob Young referred to Stewart Park and to Cleveland Show earlier on. Can I, and the Mayor referred quite regularly to cultural events. The Cleveland Show is 75 years old and one of the biggest cultural events in Stewart Park and in the area. The executive member was unable to answer the question that Jacob Young asked. Cleveland Show will go ahead this year, bigger and better. It has never been funded by Middlesbrough Council. It is a voluntary body and run by volunteers, and he does disservice to those volunteers in the question, which was quite frivolous, really. The show will go ahead. Its events are being booked already and have been for some time, and watch out for something bigger and better next year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mick Thompson.
I remember going back 4 years ago, and that time has gone past really quickly, but one of my first duties as executive member for Culture and Communities was to attend an event in Mima that was a presentation from that year's Turner Prize winners, Assemble, who were doing some fantastic work involving the community in architectural development. And I remember the Mayor made a statement there that stayed with me. And he said that Middlesbrough should not be defined by its disadvantage. And I know what he meant by that. And that was about, for far too long, this place has been defined by those outside, by its disadvantage, focusing on what's wrong rather than on what's strong. And we should not be defined by that, but that doesn't mean that we don't recognise the significant challenges that some people in our communities have. And in recognition of that, I'm really grateful that the Mayor supported the idea of having a social regeneration strategy, the Empower Middlesbrough strategy, that had the same gravitas as the investment prospectus that was launched at the Riverside Stadium. I remember being there and feeling very proud of a very forward-thinking, ambitious local authority, and I think that was responded to by the business community. And I have to tell you that in launching the social regeneration strategy, the response from the organisations across this place, Aging Better Middlesbrough, the MFC Foundation, Middlesbrough College, the University, Cleveland Police, a range of organisations down to some that are run by 2 or 3 people, visited the men's shed today at Bellevue. Fantastic. They've all been enthused and encouraged and determined to work together with us, because we cannot do this alone. We can only do it together. And I have to say that I'm very grateful to the Mayor for that. But I think that the people of Middlesbrough have great reason to feel grateful for the work. And I know he won't like this because he doesn't like being complimented, but I'm going to do it, and I'm sure lots of other people would as well. But just to take some of the highlights on the delivering fair in Middlesbrough from the document. Supporting over 2,000 adult learners, doubled the number of apprentices we employ, and made sure that they are paid a good rate for what they do. A community bank that is being delivered and ready for its doors to be opened. 4.6 million in pay to all council employees, the Middlesbrough living wage. And selective landlord licensing. We heard the voice of people in North Thormesby, and we've heard the voice of the people in Nunthorpe. We need to do our bit to stand alongside them and ensure that landlords play their part in creating those communities. I could go on the great stuff, the great legacy that our mayor, our Labour mayor, leaves for whoever takes his place. And I'm grateful not only as a Labour councillor, but as a Middlesbrough resident for the fantastic legacy that he leaves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Story.
Chair, I'd like to welcome this report. I think sometimes we're all too close to a lot of this stuff. You see this written down, and I actually think often we forget the amount of work that's going on, all the different policies that are being introduced. When you see it written down like this, and it's as stark as this, I think it becomes clear the fantastic progress that's being made in Middlesbrough. And I think when we talk about cuts in this place, it's not an exaggeration about cuts, it's not an exaggeration at all in terms of austerity. But I think it's really important that looking at this document and seeing the work that is happening, in spite of all of that, it makes all of these achievements that much more remarkable, really. I think when I look through this document, and certain things do stand out, the living wage being paid to as many workers as it is, the fact that we've now got an organisation building council houses for the first time in a generation, all of those things are fantastic. From my personal experience, there's that thing there about early help in social care, which one of the most rewarding things I've done in scrutiny is the recent work we've done about early help, and actually going out on the rounds with social workers and meeting with some of the families who have issues, who the council are doing everything they can to try and make sure that their children don't have to be taken into care, and they do everything they can to work with organisations and with agencies to stop that from happening. And some of those issues are incredibly complex, and some of these officers have a lot of cases on their books, but it is hard work, but it is tremendously valuable to the town. And seeing that firsthand, I'd recommend any councillors in the room who haven't perhaps done that, so they should do that, because it really opens your eyes to what's happening on the ground and the hard work that's taking place in terms of one of the most difficult areas of council policy in terms of the cuts and the gap in terms of funding and the stresses that we face. So those things are really important. I think the investment prospectus is tremendously exciting. It shows ambition and it shows aspiration, and those aren't buzzwords, they're not management speak. People in this town do have aspiration, they are ambitious, they do want more, they want the town to succeed and go forward, they want it to change. I've seen that, I've spoken to people in my ward and on the doorstep around the town recently, where people have been talking to us about what they'd like to see from the town, and the social regeneration stuff and Empower will only add to that and help people to feel part of the council and what the council's doing for them in their areas. And then the thing there about the report that said we're one of the top 10 small cities in Europe. I think that's a tremendously important thing. We're not just a small town. We're not happy to stand still. We're not just going to wait for things to come along. We're going to do things. We're going to take action. We're going to make sure that we change this place to make it the best place it can be. And I remember 4 years ago, before I was in this place, I remember 4 years ago working with Dave and working with colleagues to write Dave's manifesto when he was standing for mayor. And so much of what's in here is delivering on Dave's manifesto. And what this really speaks to is the political point, which is that if you elect a Labour council and you look at our prospectus and you see what we're promising, we will deliver upon that. And that's what's in this document. This is telling the people of Middlesbrough, we promised to deliver these things and we are doing so. And I think in the elections in May, there's always one side of this chamber who stand up and put forward ideas and talk about what they would do and how they would do things, how they would change things for the better. And there's other people in this place who just want to say why things are going wrong. And I don't necessarily decry them for doing that. That's okay. but you also have to say what you would do differently. And we don't hear that, and it means the minority voice isn't heard. And I think those people do a disservice to the people in this town who don't vote for the Labour Party, because I think they should see a prospectus. I think they should see the ideas from the opposition, but they don't. And too often that is leaving those people without a voice, and I think that's a shame. But I think this document shows what we do when we come together as a town, the people of the town, with the councillors in this place, and with Mayor Budd. And just a final thing I'd like to say, I think Dave does what he does with a tremendous lack of bombast. There's no show here. It's just Dave talking about what he's doing for the town. And he's a dedicated public servant who isn't going to be running this time. And I think we should all praise and thank Dave for what he's done for this town over many, many years, and for the way that he's conducted himself in public office, because he is an outstanding public servant and someone I've been proud to work with over many years as an officer and as an elected member. So thank you, Dave, for everything you've done.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Arundel.
Thank you, Chair. In the Mayor's speech, which some of it I do agree, I've done some good things. I'm not going to knock everything. But he mentioned housing, yeah? And he mentioned the promotional work they've done. And he mentioned the prospects of bringing people to the town, businesses to the town. None of this will happen unless you sort the schools out. Because people will not go to a town if there are no school places for their children. I've spoken to the Chief Executive about this, and he agrees. I'm sure he does. So it's most important that we all take on board the fact that nothing will happen in this town regarding expansion of the town unless you sort this problem out with school places. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Is anybody else? Sorry. Yes, Councillor Rathmel.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take these off because I don't believe they're rose-tinted like some people would want. Whilst I do acknowledge some of the good work the Mayor has done, I would like to point out that we've always spent the last 4 years being told we need to invest in Middlesbrough to ensure its a sustainable future. Yet, despite multi-million-pound investment and multi-million-pound sale of council assets, it was in the article as the council silver, the sorry state of the council, and the reality is that after 4 years, we've seen record levels of borrowing at £100,000 a week. Shops continuing to close, office blocks standing empty, poor infrastructure, which are actually preventing people in South Middlesbrough from getting in the town. And we've also seen mega council tax rises. Now, we have been asked, and it's been pointed out, that this side of the chamber never point anything out, the opposition never do. But I do believe it was the opposition that managed to save the bus station. I also believe it's the opposition that have referenced the lack of... Do you want to get order, Chair? Or... All right, thank you. I also believe it's the...
Everybody, please. Yes, there is a councillor on his feet speaking. I can hear chitter-chatter from the members, and I can also hear comments from the public. So please, can everybody show order? There is a member on his feet speaking.
I also believe it's the opposition that have raised the concerns about lack of community hubs and community facilities, a real issue in my ward, for example. I don't know if it's ever been a concern of the elected members from that cover Tollsby, but I do recall one of their election pledges were the closed shops there. It's only now, prior to an election, that they can submit a petition about it. Outstanding work for the residents. So by having a voice and speaking for the residents, I wouldn't see that as a negative. I would see it as a positive. Whenever there's been consultation, we've always engaged. In fact, we've even been met with, it doesn't matter, I get sign off on the decision. That was at one public meeting regarding Dixon's Bank. So I think whilst you're being critical of what the opposition have to say, you have to inject an element of realism in your report, and that's what it seems to lack. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Councillor, you've spoken once, so that's it. No, Councillor, you've spoke once. Councillor Higgins.
I'd just like to reiterate about the community bank. I think it's an absolutely fantastic thing for Middlesbrough. It means all those people who previously never had a bank account because basically they didn't have enough money and the banks weren't interested. This is going to help a lot of people in Middlesbrough. They won't have to go to these stores and pay absolute tremendous amount of interest for the things that they need for the home, like a new fridge or a cooker. They can go to the bank and get a loan, and you only need small loans and a small amount of interest. So I'd just like to thank the Mayor very much for that, because it'll help a great many people in Middlesbrough, and it will go on. Okay? So thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, nobody else wishes to speak. I'll now invite the Mayor to respond to some of the comments and questions that have been raised. Mayor Budd.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for many of the comments that have been made. Councillor Arundel is perfectly right. Schools are really important. We will get that sorted. One of the reasons that our schools are full is because they are getting better. Nearly all of our schools have got better, and it does mean that people do not go out of the town anymore. So, you know, there's two sides to that. Councillor Rothwell mentioned a number of myths. The myth that we were going to knock the bus station down, it was never true. I don't know how many more times we have to say that. He talks about council tax rises, which are built into the system by government. They assume, and in the case of 90-odd% of local authorities in this country, of whatever political colour, they are assumed to rise, and they do. The other myth about not borrowing money, we've heard that from time to time from a lot of people here. We can only borrow money which we can afford to repay, and the Section 151 officer will make sure that we do that. The cost of our borrowing is less, and repayments is less than 10% of our income. This morning I commented at the Combined Authority meeting that in their case, in 3 years' time, it will be 35% of their income, and in 2025 it will be 65% of their income. We are not heading in that direction. So borrowing is necessary. Government borrows over and over again and pretends that it's not borrowing more. I'm not remotely embarrassed to suggest that council funding needs to borrow. Councils need to borrow money for projects. I think we've already seen the success of our investment. We need to put public money in before private money comes along. I think what you'll see in Middlehaven in future is less and less public money and more private funding. There are already 2 potential housing schemes there which will not need any contribution from our funding whatsoever. So the art in this, as we've seen with the revival of areas for many years, not just in this country but beyond, is that you put the public money in first and the private money follows, and that is exactly what's happening here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, no, there's no point of order, Councillor. Everybody's had the opportunity to speak. The Mayor has responded. We are moving on. Agenda item 13, strategic plan. No, Councillor, no. Councillor, it is not. I am not accepting anything from your good self regarding this. Everybody's had the opportunity to speak, including yourself. The Mayor has responded, and I'm now shutting down this agenda item and moving on. Agenda item 13, strategic plan 2019-2022. Mayor Budd.
This follows on from the previous report quite well. It obviously is necessary for stability and continuity to allow us to do the things that are envisaged in the next few years. I think some of the progress more recently in the strategic plan 18-19, and some of this has been referred to already, but we've got an unqualified value for money opinion, which I think has been referred to already. Something that doesn't sound very much, but the embedding of corporate values into the organisation. I think we could have said, and I probably should have said, that the way that the council internally has changed has enabled us to do the things that we want to do politically. And I know that the way that the Chief Executive and many others have worked to be able to do this it is quite remarkable. So the organisation itself has changed to enable us to do those things, and I think we sometimes forget that. We've had the launch of the Council's first digital strategy, more progress on physical regeneration, which I've mentioned already. Mentioned the combined authority as well. Reopening of Middlesbrough Town Hall, which really, it's probably the only thing that I can recall where I haven't had any objections to it. The launch of the Middlesbrough Place brand, more actions around reducing income inequality as far as we can, and the formation of the housing delivery vehicle. So all of these things I think have been mentioned already today in one form or another. The future of local government remains uncertain in the sense of funding. I've said already that we need information as soon as possible. We need to be able to end uncertainty. I think we've already referred again to the social regeneration strategy, which I think will grow. And as Councillor Thompson has said, this is really important. This is about people. It's not about buildings. It's not about institutions. It's about the people who live in our town. So the strategic plan attached in Appendix 1 goes through those items in some detail around our vision and how we're doing, our resources, our priorities, how we will measure success, which I think is important. And we certainly report back on all of these things as often as possible. And Appendix 2, I think, details what particular parts of the Council will do. So I think that's all from me. I recommend the report.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Anybody wish to... Yeah, I've got you, Councillor Arundale. And anybody else? Okay, Councillor Arundale.
Yes. Let me see now, where are we? Agenda item 13, Appendix 2, Directorate Priorities. Page 2, Children's Services, and I'll read it out. Item 1. Strategic Planning Group to develop a pupil place planning strategy to ensure sufficient, appropriate, high-quality places are available for children and young people now and in the future. A little bit a case of shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted, but I do welcome this move, and I make no apology for beating the same drum about the kids' education. I have grandchildren coming through the system, and I would just disservice them if I didn't raise this subject again and again. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions, comments? Okay. Can we agree the recommendations? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 14, British exit from the European Union. Mayor Budd.
Right, where do we start? We've talked about this on a number of occasions in the past, and I'm not going to debate the rights and wrongs of Brexit, although other people might want to. I think there was a hope that this last week would have moved us on a little bit. It doesn't seem to have done. I don't know when we will move on. This report is largely about the effects of Brexit on Middlesbrough. The report, again, which I've referred to before, in October 16, set out a number of things which are detailed in paragraphs 13 and 14, which need to be addressed and which we need to look at. It is not clear about any of those yet. So, again, we are mired in uncertainty. We are asked, I think, and it's still the case, to report weekly to government about the effects of Brexit. Not quite sure what we're supposed to say. There are particular items around ports and so on. But I think a question recently was, what effect has it had on your community, which is a more difficult question. So we are reporting things in. One of the items which again I've referred to before is a replacement for European funding, which is incredibly important in Tees Valley and Durham, as we have we're fairly well up the league in terms of how much we get. The UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is designed to replace European funding. I think when the Tees Valley leaders and I went down to DCLG, as it was then, to negotiate the devolution deal, we asked at that point where European funding would be replaced from and how much we would get. We were told it was going to be decided imminently. That's more than 2 years ago now. We've written at my insistence today from the Combined Authority for everybody in the Combined Authority, including the local enterprise partnership. We've written again to government to ask those same questions. So we are pushing to replace that. That is really important for us. So the report details what we're trying to do to plan for Brexit. But until we know what the Brexit is, when it is, what it consists of, this is a very difficult job. So that's an update as far as I can give it. It may well change next week, who knows. It'll be good when it's over. But even if there is an agreement of some sort in the next few weeks, the transition arrangements will take a long time and will impact on us for a long time as well.
Thank you, Councillor. I understand Councillor Jacob Young has a question on this subject. Is Councillor Young still in the chamber? Or he's left. Okay. Right. Any questions, comments? Okay. Can we note the report? Thank you. Agenda item 15, urgent items. There's been none received for this meeting. Agenda item 16, members' question time. None received for this meeting. Agenda item 17, notice of motion 136. Councillor Rostron.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it would be cooler when I stand up, but it's not. It's actually hotter. I'll read the motion out as required, Chair. That Middlesbrough Council recognises the recommendations contained within the Local Government Ethical Standards, a review by the Committee on Standards in Public. That in the interest of promoting the Code of Conduct 7 principles, public life of selflessness, objectivity, accountability, honesty, integrity, openness and leadership, Middlesbrough Council will ask the Standards Committee to examine the full report and bring forward any recommendations as a result. In its review of local government ethical standards, published following a year-long review and consultation, the committee has called for council standard boards to be given more power to act on poor conduct from councillors. The recommendations would give local authorities the power to suspend members for the most serious or repeated breaches or violations of the Code of Conduct, most likely relating to harassment, bullying and failures to declare financial interests. We believe that Middlesbrough Council and all its public buildings should be safe places, free from harassment, bullying or discrimination. And in bringing this motion, we want to ensure that all elected members adhere at all times to these principles and set an example for others to follow. So moved, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder?
And reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor. I now invite Councillor Rostron to speak to the motion. Councillor Rostron.
As councillors, we are in a privileged position. We are leaders of our communities. And in my view, we should be prepared to be responsible for our actions. We are required to have a code of conduct, both for officers and for elected members. And those codes of conduct are very similar, and they state that we are expected to behave with the highest possible standards. If an officer is alleged to breach the code of conduct, there is a disciplinary hearing, and that officer could be dismissed. If a councillor breaches the code of conduct, it is referred to the Standards Committee. When I first got on this council in 2007, the Standards Committee was a very different animal. It did have some sanctions that it could put onto councillors. One of them was suspension. But in 2010, the then Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government changed the rules with regard to sanctions, and he removed the more serious sanctions from the Standards Committees. And I think then, as a Standard Committee, I think we felt we were working with one hand tied behind our backs because there was very little we could do. And it wasn't just in Middlesbrough, this was happening countrywide. And councillors of all political persuasions started making representations to the new Secretary of State and also to the Local Government Association. As a result of that, they were put under so much pressure, they did review the standards procedures, and they have come up with a list of best practice, 15 items in there, and 25 recommendations, 26 recommendations. I won't read them all out because I think we've been here quite long enough, but I would like to draw your attention to two of them. One is that they've now brought back the rules that we can suspend councillors for up to 6 months if the Standards Committee and the independent person on the Standards Committee accepts that. And the second thing is, there's a recommendation that we should have a right of appeal, an appeal to the local government ombudsman. At the moment, there isn't a right of appeal. We have a new council come May the 3rd, and I think if we agree this motion, it will give the new council the authority to actually implement the recommendations from government when government give us the go-ahead to do it, so it would avoid any delay. And I would ask all councillors to support this motion in the interests of good and fair governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody wish to contribute? Okay. Sorry, Councillor, yeah, Councillor Rathmell.
I was just making notes. Yes, thank you for bringing this motion forward. I do actually see it as a positive. Whilst it's asking for us to recognise the recommendations, because this is a motion produced by yourself and seconded by Councillor Rooney, I am disappointed to see that we're not looking at actually adapting something that's non-political as a measure, because we've heard about how you felt like you've had your hands tied behind your back since the standards process was changed, but you've always retained political balance. And it's sometimes been noted that that's been used to an advantage. So it's disappointing that it doesn't look at this council putting a motion forward that incorporates something more. I know you've only provided examples of the most serious, but I think to members of the public and to residents, that should also contain honesty and integrity, because bullying and harassment, we've heard how that's dealt with, and we've heard the Mayor speak with forked tongue. It doesn't apply to certain officers, it does to members, in his opinion. So it would be nice to see a more ethical approach and this authority actually take the lead and go somewhat further. And that's my only comment on it, but I do fully support it. It's just disappointing in that we haven't gone that one step further and led the way. But thank you for putting the motion to full council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Denise Rooney.
Right, thank you, Chair. Referring to the report, two things I want to make clear. The review of the ethical standards that happened or began over a year ago, the Middlesbrough Council did actually put in a written representation to that. It was done through the Corporate Affairs Committee and it was signed off by this council, and we raised quite a number of issues about how the Standards Committee should be improved or could be improved. In terms of the content of the report, I'd advise Councillor Rathmell to actually download the report and read the full report, because there is a lot more in that. And what we're asking for today is that the Standards Committee takes the report away, examines it and comes back with the recommendations and ways in which we can implement a number of certainly the best practices and the recommendations as government allows us to. In terms of the list of best practice, there are 15 and they can be incorporated into our constitution very quickly. We actually are meeting a number of them. If we look through them, they're already in the Code of Conduct, and so it won't be an onerous task to include those in. There are a number of references in there, and best practice, include provisions in the code requiring councillors to comply with formal standards. We don't disagree with that. Councils should publish a clear and straightforward public interest test against which allegations are made, so further safeguards and monitoring to go with that. And local authorities should have access to at least 2 independent persons. There are some protections in there for independent persons to make sure that they are not used in the wrong way, that information is put forward to them and they have proper indemnity insurance. In terms of the list of recommendations, which we will have to wait for the government to sanction, then a couple that I would like to draw attention to are councillors should be presumed to be acting in an official capacity in their public conduct, including statements on publicly accessible social media. Now, we know how damaging social media can be. We've heard about that today, and we've heard about it in the past. And actually holding people to account for the things that they say on social media is, in my view, a very positive step forward. One of the other things that I would like to mention is, again, as Councillor Rostron said, councillors should be given the right to appeal to the local government ombudsman. We see that as a fair process, and I would like, and also that the local government ombudsman should be given the power to investigate and decide upon an allegation. So it goes a little bit further than just the right of appeal, that we've got another body in there that's making sure that everything is done correctly. So I would just like to recommend the proposal to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. No, sir. So, councillor, you've spoken once. Councillor, you've been a councillor for 4 years now. You understand how the systems work. You're allowed to speak once. You don't get the opportunity to come back in because you think of something else. I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. There's no point. There isn't a point of order, councillor. Councillor, please. I'm not giving you the opportunity to come back in. Right? Does anybody else wish to speak? Okay, nobody's spoke against it, Councillor Rostron, so you don't have to sum up if you don't want to. You're comfortable to go straight to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Okay, that is passed unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 18, notice of urgent motion. There isn't one for this meeting. Agenda item 19, council diary. James.
Chair, Council has asked to approve the diary for the upcoming municipal year and also asked to designate all meetings of full council other than the annual general meeting and the budget setting meeting as meetings which members of the public can put questions to council. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Can we agree? Okay, thank you. That being the conclusion of all business, I'd like to bring this meeting to a close.